participating once again in the Vayichan program. And I want to thank Rav Taragin Shlita and Yeshivat Hakotel for having this remarkable idea and for seeing it through. And even though this is part of the Vayichan program, it is even a greater pleasure to be able to share Torah in a live setting with actual Talmidim who are here present in the room. So I thank all of you for being here, and hopefully we'll be able to share some Torah together and to inspire ourselves together as we enter into this tkufa of the 3 weeks, or I guess as far as the Vayichan program, as we get closer to Tisha B'Av as time goes on. So what we're supposed to be focusing on this time of the year is very clearly a sense of Ben Adam L'Chavero, and the reason for that is pretty straightforward. We have various Mamari Chazal about why it was that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, which Averos in particular led to the Churban Abayis. The Gemara Masechah Shabbos that we learned in the Daf Yomi not too long ago identified 7 or 8 different causes for the Churban Abayis, but none of those causes, and the Gemara B'Metzia talks about, because we didn't go through Mishur Sadin, there are all sorts of different reasons, but yet none of them are nearly as widespread, as popular, as often quoted as what the Gemara Masechas Yoma tells us. The Gemara Masechas Yoma tells us that the Churban Bayisheni happened on account of Sinas Chinam, and therefore it's been the avoda of Klal Yisrael over the course of the centuries to work on that midah, to work on the midah of Ahavas Yisrael, to work on the midah of coming together, of Achdut, of Chesed, of Ben Adam L'Chavero, specifically during the time of the Ben HaMitzarim, specifically during the time of the 3 weeks and the time of the 9 days, and Bez Hashem, because we know that's going to lead us to a sense of Geula. That's going to be the midah that brings about the Geula. Now, in this year, there's another point of emphasis that can't escape anybody's attention. I was just on a rabbinic call a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, with a number of rabbanim from throughout the country, and we were talking about the possibility of all getting together, I guess inspired by Vayichan in some way, of all getting together and creating like almost a unified curriculum for the Yom Noraim. And the reason that we thought it might be a good idea, even though normally every community has their own needs and their own shortcomings and their own kochos and their own things that they're really good at, and each community and each person really needs to be inspired in their own way and needs to work on different things. But we're at a very, very unique point in history. In my entire life, and granted I'm not that old, but in my 43 years on this earth, now you know exactly how old, in my 43 years on this earth, I do not ever remember a time where all of humanity was thinking about one thing, that their primary attention was on one thing, that's what the focus has been on for months, not for like a day, not like, JFK assassinated, so it's on everyone's mind for a little bit, on America's mind for longer, on people in other countries' mind for less long. No, the entire humanity is completely focused on one thing, and there is a certain sense of darkness in the world. We'll call it what it is. We like to highlight the positive, and we like to talk about all of the great things that have come out of this, and the family time, and it's wonderful, it's true, and the chesed that people have been able to do, and that's wonderful, and it's true. But overall, there is a sense of darkness. There is a sense of gloom in the world. And that's something that requires a lot of chizuk. Rav Shechter just wrote a tshuva where he was matir for those who are experiencing sadness, unusual sadness, to listen to music during the 3 weeks. Because the issue of listening to music is not to enjoy music, not to celebrate the music, but if it's just to basically be able to function as a normal, healthy, well-balanced, happy human being, well then you're allowed to do that during the 3 weeks. That's where we are, that those are the kinds of tshuvos that are being written. Now exactly what level of sadness, I'm not going to get into the halacha right now, but that's what's being written. But I want to focus on what our response to that is. There's a remarkable vart that came to me a number of years ago on a Friday night. I was looking through the parasha, and I later heard it from someone else. So it must be recorded somewhere. Someone must say this. But I was looking through the parasha once, and we were going through the makos. And if you look at makas choshech, the description the Chumash has for makas choshech, The pasuk describes that there's a choshech hafela b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, that there's this terrible darkness in all of Mitzrayim. V'lo ra'u ish es achiv, and nobody was able to see each other. V'lo kam ish mitachtav, and man couldn't get up from under him. And then the pasuk says, "U'luchal b'nei Yisrael," everything was fine, and there was light. So what exactly is the hemshech over there? What happened? We're saying there was choshech hafela b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. There was darkness in all of Eretz Mitzrayim. Then the next line is v'lo ra'u ish es achiv. Of course, lo ra'u ish es achiv. That's the concept of darkness, right? The concept of darkness is that you don't see. So what's the Torah teaching me by saying that? Oh, by the way, and you know what happens in the dark? You can't see. You can't see your friends in the dark. Of course. What's the pasuk teaching me? And then lo kam ish mitach. Why couldn't people get up? What was their problem arising? Why couldn't they stand? Mitachtav. What does that word even mean? Mitachtav from what's tachas? Tachas. If you're taking a quick quiz in in how to translate words, right? The shorish tachas means tachas under. Mitachtav from his under. What? What in the world is that? From under him? Lo kamish. People didn't get up. What's mitachtav? So there's a fascinating insight of the Aksav HaKabbalah that got me going along this path. Aksav HaKabbalah is a remarkable sefer that is probably not used as much as it should be. If you want to go through Chumash and really account for each and every word, there's a whole genre of Svarim that accounts for each and every word of Chumash and all of the diukim you can make and why certain words are used in certain places and is 1,000% loyal to the Torah Shabbal Peh. And in fact were written in a way to sort of answer a movement of the time that was de-emphasizing Torah Shabbal Peh, and that's putting it mildly. You have Svarim like the Malbim, like the Netziv on Chumash, like Aksav HaKabbalah. Every word accounted for 1,000%, not just loyal, but showing you how the Torah Shabbal Peh comes through in the Torah Shabbat if you know how to really pay attention to the Torah Shabbat. And Aksav HaKabbalah says the following. He says, the word tachas means under, you're right, but taf, ches, taf is used in a different context as well. The Chumash and the Navi tells us many times that there's a lashon of techas, lo tira v'lo techas. Don't be afraid. Techas. What's techas? Don't be terrified. Don't be terror-stricken. Lo kam ish mitachtav. People couldn't move because they were terrified. They were afraid to leave their homes. They were afraid to move. They were afraid to go about freely. Something that we can have a little bit of a sense of what that is. To be stuck in your house and be afraid to go out because who knows what you're exposing yourself to. Lo kam ish mitachtav. They were terrified. When you look at the Midrashei Chazal on Makas Choshech, it's remarkable. The Midrashei Chazal apparently assumed that Makas Choshech was the most terrifying of all the Makos. Now, I don't know about you, but I've experienced dark in the past. Every time I shut my lights in my room at night, it's dark. And I go to sleep, and I'm at a point in life now, at the age of 43, where I'm no longer terrified of the dark. You know what I do find terrifying? When I came out of my cabin this morning, and I saw 4 deer right in front of my cabin, I was terrified. So, Sad Tzvi, I started going through the sugis and Semikhah. What if it goes into my thing and I close the door? But I was terrified. Are deer afraid of people? Are people supposed to be afraid of deer? I don't know. So there were makos that were much more terrifying than Choshech, I think. I don't know if I would pour drinking water and it turned into blood. That would be pretty terrifying. That's the stuff horror movies are made of. But this doesn't seem to be the stuff that horror movies are made of. It's the setting. Darkness is the setting for bad things in horror movies. But it's not the bad thing itself. So what's so terrifying about Makas Choshech? So listen to Uvart. There was darkness in Eretz Mitzrayim. That alone wouldn't have been so terrifying. That doesn't lead directly to Lo Kam Ish Mitachtav. There's another phrase that's stuck in there. Lo Ra'u Ish Esachav. That nobody was able to see anybody else. Then Lo Kam Ish Mitachtav. You see, human beings have an incredible capacity to withstand just about anything, provided that we have other people to connect with. We have other people that are with us in the fight, that are there to support us, that are just there, even if they can't do anything to help us. Just say, yeah, I get it. I'm going through it too. Or I feel your pain. I love you. Whenever we feel that having other people with us gives us incredible kochos. And what was so terrifying about Makas Choshech was for all the other Makos, yeah, they went through Dam Sardei, they went through all of them. But they got to see other people going through the same thing. And that gives people a sense of chizuk. It gives people a sense of chizuk just to see other people, just to connect with other people. Can you imagine if we would have gone through the last 3 months without Zoom? 4 months already. What that would have been like? To see other people gives a person a sense of chizuk. And then it became terrifying. Then lo kam ish, as the Kabbalah says, mitach tov, because they were terrified. So the best eitzah in a time like this, the best eitzah in times where people are scared, the best eitzah in times where the future of the world is more obviously, it's always uncertain, but more obviously uncertain, is to connect with other people, is to show other people, obviously in a safe way, but to show other people that we're there, to be there for other people. And that brings us to the middos chesed. You know, the idea of doing chesed with other people is something that we often think of as like, it's a really nice thing. If you're a bal middos, you do chesed. You know, Ben Torah though learns Torah, he doesn't do chesed. Chesed, it's great. The seminaries should keep on doing chesed. Right? Just don't tell me in yeshiva that I should do chesed. Don't bother me to worry about chesed when I have bigger things on my plate. And the Chavetz Chaim was a Talmid Chacham, pretty big Talmid Chacham. Chavetz Chaim wrote a sefer called Ahavas Chesed, and in the introduction to the sefer Ahavas Chesed, he described the value of the middos chesed, of what chesed does, and to frame it a little bit before we get into what the Chavetz Chaim actually says. Let me share with you a word from Rav Aryeh Lebowitz that I think is emes la'amita shel Torah. You know, the Chazal tell us in a couple of different places, mahu afata, that we're supposed to emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Whatever he does, we do, right? Why? Because we have halachta b'dracha. We're supposed to follow in his ways. So how do you follow his ways? Eish uchla. You can't. He's an all-consuming fire. You can't be mistabek b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean to follow in his ways? What does it mean to be mistabek b'Hashem? Mahu afata. You do what he does. So everything, all the descriptions we have of how Hashem behaves, we're supposed to do those same things. The only thing is, there are two different passages in Chazal that describe two different sets of Mahu Afata. On the one hand, you have Mahu Rachum, Afata Rachum, Mahu Chanun, Afata Chanun. He's merciful, he's kind, he's compassionate. We should be merciful, we should be kind, we should be compassionate. And on the other hand, you have Mahu Malbish Arumin, Afata Malbish Arumin. Mahu mevaker cholim, afata mevaker cholim, mahu menachem. All of these things that he does. He says Rav Aryeh Lebowitz, two sugyas, two gemaras, two totally separate din. They're both about binad l'chaver. Mahu rachum, mahu chanun. Chanun is about what we are supposed to be. It's what the Vilna Gaon refers to as binad la'atzma. That a person is supposed to be so refined and so compassionate and so caring and so giving like HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. That should be our essence. That should be what we are. Mahu malbish harumin, mahu mevaker cholim. That's not what we are. That's what we do. And what we do should be a reflection of what we are. And what we are should be a reflection of what we do. What we do, that's binad l'chaver. Someone comes to your door and they desperately need tzedakah. So there are two approaches that are both half approaches. One approach is, I just tell me what you need, I'm in a rush. And write the check, whatever he needs. You've given stuff, you've taken care of him, that sense of compassion. If you forget about him the second he leaves your door, the sense of compassion isn't there. You took care of him. You wrote the check, he's happy, he didn't have to waste much time with you, he can move on to the next house. Is good. Ma'urachum, not so good. Or a person will say, you don't have any money, but you feel so terribly for him. I remember I was once walking in Yisrael when I was a Yeshiva Bacher, and someone said to me, there was an ani that asked for money, and I think I honestly said, I don't remember if it was honest, but I'm pretty sure it was honest. They said, I don't have anything, and he said, as tein li bracha, only in Israel. Okay, so at least give me a bracha. At least give me a bracha. That comes from Mahurach and Maluchanu. You give a bracha. You care. You're concerned about the person. You daven for the person. You stop and you say it's tefillah that the person should be able to pull it together. So there are these two elements. There's what we are and what we do. And people fundamentally are b'tzelem elokim. We are good people. What we generally need to work on more is what we actually do. Is how much chesed we actually do. And the Chofetz Chaim highlights in his Hakdama to Ahavas Chesed how Kodesh Baruch Hu is the ultimate Bal Chesed. Hashem does chesed with everybody, especially Klal Yisrael, who he treats as his own children. V'alachta b'drachav means that we're supposed to be like Hashem. In that way, there are 8 different times in Chumash that we're told to follow in the ways of Hashem, the Chofetz Chaim points out, and then again in Navi, and countless times that are at least alluded to in the Torah. This is like a major avoda of what we're supposed to do. And you know what? When you do chesed, it's l'tov lach, the Chumash tells us. It's for your own benefit. And a lot of times people think that when I want to take care of other people, I do chesed. We don't realize how much chesed actually helps us. It helps us in many ways. One way that helps us is it feels good. You don't feel great after being selfish, right? When you I don't know, in yeshiva or something, there's the dinner that everyone likes. What's the dinner that everyone likes?
Mac and cheese.
Really? Yeah, mac and cheese? Okay, mac and cheese. So there's like just a little bit of mac and cheese left in the thing. I can't even say it. Mac and cheese? Schnitzel. So it's schnitzel night, right? And there's like one schnitzel left. And and you and everyone else at your table only got singles. So it's like a mad dash. So you go, you got it. You won. You grabbed it. How good do you feel about that? For 1 second, you feel good. And then you feel like a piece of garbage after that. Like, I took it away from somebody else. How good does that make me feel? How much better do you feel if you're mavati? Tell someone, go ahead. You didn't have it? Please take. If that 1 second, it's hard. But once you get over that little challenge, it feels so much better. So in that sense, chesed is good for you. You are usually in a better mood the rest of the day after you've done chesed. You start your day with a kindness, there's like a skip in your step the rest of the day. But it's good for you even in another way, in a more practical way. And obviously it's good for you, because it's a mitzvah and you're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and maybe we'll get to that time permitting. But it's good for you also in a more practical way. There is this concept that Chazal seem to highlight a lot when it comes to the mitzvah of tzedakah. That the more you give tzedakah, the wealthier you get. What do Chazal say? Aser ta'aser, aser b'shvil, shetis asher. Give money so that you'll become rich. Melach mamon chaser. The Gemara in Ksub is the preservative, the salt, the preservative for money. You know how to preserve your money? Chaser. Just keep giving it away. Chazal have like this tradition that giving tzedakah makes you rich. But it's not only true about tzedakah. It's true about every chesed that you do. Doing a chesed somehow comes back to you. It boomerangs right back to you. And you become the beneficiary of people's goodwill. And so it's true, Chazal are talking about schar min hashamayim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu arranges the world to make sure it's like that, but it can even be explained in like rational terms. There are secular books that describe this phenomenon. There's a wonderful book called Give and Take by a fellow named Adam Grant, who is, I don't believe he's a Jew, but he was a professor in Wharton, in the business school in the University of Pennsylvania. And he wrote a book called Give and Take. He wrote other books also, but this one is good. The Give and Take, it's better than his others. Give and Take is a book about giving, about what it means to be a giver. And he writes in there that they did a study of medical students. I forgot what country it is, in like Denmark or something. I could be wrong about the country. Whatever country it was, where there's like a 6-year medical program that you go through. And they gave like a psychological exam to the students on day 1 of year 1 to basically assess, are these people givers, takers, or I forgot the word he uses, I use the term scorekeepers. Right? Givers are people who can't give enough. They always want to do more for you. They always want to do more for you. Takers, they're always looking at what advantage they can get, a leg up, how they can work the system to their own advantage. Scorekeepers, those guys. Those are the people who are like, wait a second, I'll give you this, but you got to give me something back. And I'll invite you to my house, but this is already the second time. You haven't invited me twice to your house. Like they're keeping score always. of exactly is everything even? Like everything has to be even when it comes to their chesed. So they did this exam to assess people's personalities, and they were hoping to prove that the givers finished first. You know, they wanted to. After the first year of medical school, the givers were largely at the bottom of the class. The takers were largely at the top of the class, and they thought, "Ay vey, this is not, this is not the conclusion we were hoping to reach." You know, it's like I'm done. You know, like this is, you know, they were not. This was not what they were looking for. And then they continued to track them. And after 6 years of medical school, the givers had risen to the top and the takers had fallen to the bottom. How does that happen? And what they realized was that over time, when a person is a giver, other people appreciate it and notice it and want to reciprocate. And they're not going to let you fail. Because next time you need somebody's notes, if you gave of yourself that first year when everybody was drowning, and you were willing to share of what you had, of your knowledge, of your time, it's always going to come back around. It's an actual practical benefit. It's not only the magic of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Hashgacha. It's an actual practical benefit. I was just reading a remarkable book. My friend Bensy Rudinsky sent me a book. He sent me an email whether you can get a book in the mail. It's from me. Read it. So I listened. I read it. It's also a secular book written by a Jew. It's called The Choice. Anyone ever hear of the book here? So it was written by a Holocaust survivor, Dr. Edith Eva Eger, EEE. And I had never read a book written by a Holocaust survivor who was not religious. I know we're always told the stories, rightfully so, of people who came out with their emunah intact. We don't often hear about the people who weren't from before and weren't from after. They just weren't raised with Torah mitzvahs, and they didn't go back to a life of Torah mitzvahs. But Kedoshim, they're absolutely holy. Right? That's the famous Maisa with Rav Moshe. How much time do I have left? Like 5 minutes? Okay. The famous Maisa with Rav Moshe that someone made famous because the guy who it happened to wrote the story up and published it in the newspapers. This fellow was back 50 years ago. He was a teenager in Monticello, right around here, during the summertime. He was visiting his aunt and uncle, and Rav Moshe came. His uncle was a doctor, and Rav Moshe came to the doctor's office. His aunt and uncle were not frum. Now this guy was in Rabbi Tendler's shir in MTA at the time. Rabbi Tendler was teaching in MTA, and so he was a frum boy. He was a ben Torah, and Rav Moshe came to the doctor's office. His aunt said, "By the way, you know Rav Moshe Feinstein is coming tomorrow. So if you want to meet Rav Moshe, you can come to the doctor's office and hang out in the waiting room. You'll see Rav Moshe." So he went to the doctor's office, and he was waiting in the waiting room. Rav Moshe comes in, and he was like awestruck. He couldn't speak. I don't know if you have this reaction. Did you see those videos of Rav Moshe that Mr. Yarmish put out recently? It's like, it's unbelievable. I saw those videos. I just started to cry to see Rav Moshe. It was like, so he saw Rav Moshe. He was a 15-year-old kid. He was like, he couldn't move. And then his aunt, his non-religious aunt, comes into the room and says, "Oh, Rav Moshe, good to see you." Her hand on his hand. And she goes back into the doctor's office, and the guy says, "I'm so sorry. She says, no, she..." Rav Moshe takes the guy by the arm and he says, "She has numbers on her arm. She's much holier than me and you." When you read from a secular perspective, someone who went through the Holocaust, you read and you always keep in mind, much holier than any of us. What they went through. So she describes, Dr. Eger describes in one place in the book, that at one point when she was in the barracks, Mengele, Yimach Shemo, came in, and she, as a young girl, practiced. She was a dancer. She was a gymnast and a dancer. So Mengele said, "I heard there's a dancer over here. Dance for me." Can you imagine in that condition being forced to dance for this murderer who just a few hours earlier had murdered her parents? And she started to dance for him. And after she finished, he smiled and he took a loaf of bread, he threw it on the floor. And he said, like, "That's your schar." And that was it. She survived another day. A year later, she's on a death march. And death marches are called death marches because of their death marches. Most of the people, large majority of people died. They couldn't survive. The disease, the malnutrition, they couldn't survive. And she's on a death march, and she's walking, and she's falling, and she just can't do it anymore. And all of a sudden she feels people picking her up from behind. People she doesn't know. And someone whispers in her ear, "You shared your bread with us that night." In a very literal sense, chesed that you do with other people is chesed that you do with yourself. It comes around. Of course, that's not the reason we do it. We don't do it with that motive. We do it with the motive of wanting to be meitiv la'acherim, because that's the mahu avata. And if we had more time, we'd be able to elaborate a little bit on that, but we're out of time. But maybe one inyan to work on is to always be looking out for others before we look out for ourselves. It will make you a better friend. It will make you a better husband one day. And it will make you a better person. And ultimately, it will make you a much, much better Eved Hashem.